good evening to this roundtable. I say roundtable, and usually you have a picture of it in your mind of a round table with people sitting around the table, but this is a very, very large round table because we have people in Australia, we have people in the UK, and we have somebody in Italy. So it's a very big round table, but I'm sure you understand the concept. Today, I'm just to introduce myself. My name is Shug Sahadavan. I'm the CEO and founder of Testhouse Limited. We are a QA and QC consultancy company, which is quality assurance and quality control. Quality assurance being the process of taking an idea from inception to delivery from a software perspective. And that's one of the things that we do, quality assurance. And we focus heavily on D365, which is one of our core strengths. And I'll talk a little bit about D365, but we follow the waterfall, agile, and also the DevOps, kind of implementing DevOps for customers. That's roughly a quick 1-minute introduction of my organization. Dynamics D365 started as a number of different disparate products from Microsoft called Dynamics CRM, Dynamics AX, Dynamics Nav, and Dynamics Great Plains or GP. And Microsoft then invested heavily into that. They refactored, they recompartmentalized, redesigned, put a common bus underneath it called Common Data Services, and put it on the cloud and called it D365, and added a few more components or modules, if you like. So you've got the D365 sales module, you've got the marketing module, you've got the FinOps module, you've got the Business Central, you've got retail, you've got talent, professional services, and field services. I think I've covered most of those there. So really the idea is that you can run an organization buying the different modules, and you don't really need to have any other software. So this is, we've called this a Trojan horse, or the idea behind, are you implementing a Trojan horse or an Arabian horse? I mean, the concept of a Trojan horse is from the Greek war against Troy. They built a wooden horse and hid a few very experienced and very good soldiers in the Trojan horse and left it there. And the Greek army left, and the Trojans put the horse inside their city, and in the night these guys came out and opened the gates, and the Greek army came in and won the war. So that's the idea behind the Trojan horse. So we're not saying all D365 projects are Trojan horses. We're not saying that all D365 projects are doomed for failure. This is all about our experienced panel giving you your insights into how to best deliver a D365 project without encountering the potential problems that could be if you're not really that careful. I just want to say about the panel members a little bit. So around the table we've got Jill, Peter, Steve, and Stefano. So starting with Jill. Jill's an experienced trainer in D365 and understands the implementations quite well across large organizations, and is going to talk about the sort of gaps there might be from her perspective. And Peter Thompson is from Testhouse, is a quality assurance specialist, and we'll talk about the quality governance perspective and also how best to implement quality into this D365. Steve Williams is a program director level person who's done implementation of very large programs of D365, including probably the largest implementation of D365 in the UK. And he's been there and in the market for a long time, so he's very experienced in implementing CRM as well as D365 itself. Stefano is based out of Italy, and he is an MVP in D365, and especially around the FinOps side, and he will give you his insight as well. So what I would propose to do is to ask each one of them to talk about their individual experiences in implementing D365 or projects with D365, and then show any radar of any lighting into the potential problems that you could face and how you could potentially avoid them. I'll hand it over to Jill, and then we'll go over to Peter, Steve, and then Stefano in that way. Jill, over to you to start with about D365.
Thank you, Stug. I've been playing in the Dynamics Microsoft CRM space since 2002, since version 1.0 beta, or at least that's where I first IT. I'm an MCT. I've been an MCT since 2006, and I have worked on dozens and dozens of projects. And during that time, I have seen a lot of problems that come about through inadequate or even completely absent training and education. Absent training and education, or inadequate training and education, can certainly lead to what you feel subsequently is a Trojan horse, because you have something that maybe at sign off looked good and you just see problem after problem after problem. They tend to occur for a range of different reasons, and in the small time I've got here, I'm going to run through what those key reasons are. The first and probably the most obvious is a lack of end user training that causes users to just not know what they're doing and be confused by the whole application. The second is where we have the technical people on the project who have done a bit. Typically they've learned how to add fields, but there are lots and lots of different techniques that we can use to solve any particular business problem within Dynamics 365. And unless within the group as a whole, you have got people that know lots of these techniques, there is no guarantee that the solution that you choose for a particular problem will be the correct one. And often, if you choose something that just superficially looks good, but under the hood is weak, that is where the problems will come out later. I'm helping a particular client at the moment who had everything that looked good for data entry. Post sign off and everything else, they started trying to build marketing lists. Now, as I'm sure the other people on this panel will confirm, building marketing lists should be very straightforward in Dynamics, but it's not if your underlying architecture is poor. The third area that causes problems when we have this lack of training is where we have business people who argue that it's not their role to know what is in the technology before they start. And that is where they start asking for all kinds of things. And if that's then made worse by a technologist who is saying, yes, Mr. Customer, no, Mr. Customer, 3 bags full, Mr. Customer, we've got massive problems, and all of these contribute to that Trojan horse, things going wrong, things just coming out of the woodwork time and time again. So we certainly need to cover off education for everybody in the team. End user is pretty obvious. We must train our users to use the solution that we've provided to them. That means to use your processes and your data and your configuration. So obviously it is impossible to have off-the-shelf end user training. We also should be training all of the technical members of the team to make sure that they all have that breadth of education, and they're not going to design something that looks great and then immediately breaks when you try to do something like marketing lists. And thirdly, we should be training our business people in what Dynamics will do out of the box, so that they are then able to do what I call move to the middle. So we've got our business processes, we've got our technology, we move the two in together to get a solution that works. When we try to take the technology all the way over here, we often have problems. And if we try to take the users all the way over to here, we have problems. But when they both come into the middle, we can deliver a successful solution. I firmly believe, for those reasons, that education is the cornerstone of implementation success. Back to you, Sug.
Thank you very much. That's very insightful, and I think that it's very useful as well. Some of these things that people forget, and I'm glad you mentioned about the training for the users as well as the technical staff as well, because people, we have lots of customers who've gone into using D365 without training, and the people users then sort of find themselves blaming the product and saying the product is not good because they're used to something a little bit different. So thank you very much, Joe. I'll move over to Peter. Over to you.
So hi, I'm Peter. I describe myself as a serial tester. So I've been in the QA game since the mid-80s, even before it was even thought of a career path for people. So and over the course of the last 35 years, I've been involved in many digital transformation programs of various worth, from 5 million to 100 million to $560 million, and across that I've seen a pattern in some of the mistakes that are being made. So I want to just kind of talk to you about what I think are the areas for you to succeed in helping you minimize your testing cost and effort, but implementing exactly what you set out on the tin. So I guess the best place to start is requirements, and understanding the requirements, and taking it up to the next level from an assurance perspective is identifying the purpose. What is the purpose that the business are trying to achieve by implementing D365? What is it they want to achieve? Because if you understand that purpose, you can bring that lens to the requirements. And it's interesting for me in the world of QA how shift left is really picked up over the course of the last 3 or 5 years as agile has become more predominant. But it still comes back to the basics, which is understanding the purpose, understanding the requirements, understanding that those requirements meet the purpose. And I think more often than not, there's not a lot of time or effort spent with that because the QA team doesn't join till later in the project. More often than not, the requirements are there when the QA team turn up, and they're then trying to map a purpose to a set of requirements. And I think if you invest time and money early, you save time and money later. And so getting experts in, and the test team itself has to be not pure testers. It needs to be a good makeup of subject matter experts, application experts, and of course, business analysts. It's not necessarily the need to have a full team of test analysts. You need a good makeup. If you take a look at any team, it's made up of different people. It's made up of all different types because people think differently. And that's the same for the QA thing. So if you set your team up properly and get them involved early, then you can map your requirements to purpose. And then what you're testing is exactly what you need. And it's about working closely with the end user from the start, not towards the end, from the start. One of the other pitfalls that I come across is that people don't think about the environments that are required for testing. And there's a supplementary one to that, and that's about the data and the data migration into those environments to support what you're trying to achieve. So I've worked on a number of programs where I've come in the door or been parachuted in the door, and the first thing I've looked at is the one test environment that supports a $250 million program. Well, within that program, you need to integrate legacy system to new. You need to map all your business processes. You need a training training to be done, everything to be monitored, and you cannot do that all with one environment. If you go back to your basic principles of QA, if you can isolate the functionality within the system, and even better when you're implementing something like D365, if you can use out of the box as opposed to manipulation to get it to do what you want to do, then you save time, cost, and effort. But the environment is key. You want an environment where you can do a system test, you need an environment to integrate, and more crucially, you need an environment to performance test. Because as you go through the life cycle of testing, if you are making changes to your legacy system or even to D365 itself and coding is being introduced, as the time pressures come on, people stop coding for performance and they code for functionality. So without that detailed, non-functional testing environment, you do end up with more hiccups in production than you'd like. And I've had experience of systems falling over at 2 concurrent users because the coding has been done for the functionality. So a recommendation for me would be to use out of the box, because actually you shouldn't have to test that. It should work. Have a good set of environments that allow you to go through a life cycle, and more importantly, think about the future. Because one environment won't support the future. Products like D365 are released quarterly, monthly, half yearly, with major patches, minor patches. You need the legacy there. You need that environment footprint to allow you to keep progressing and progressing at speed. I referred to data migration a little bit a while ago, and I think that's key as well, because you are going to take data from one system to another. And I can guarantee you that the databases aren't exactly the same. So investing your time and effort in making sure that migration is right, again, means when you're physically testing the system, the integration testing or the system testing, your confidence where your issues are will be in the systems and not the data that you've migrated. A good data strategy will make any project successful from start to finish. If you don't think about the data and think it's just a lift and shift, then you'll come across so many data related issues, you will start to struggle to find what are the system related issues via the data related issues. And as you go through the life cycle, coming back to what I started with, you've got to still focus on the purpose. And so some of that purpose is, what is the end user looking for? And there'll be different types of end users. There'll be your admin user, there'll be your just front end user, there'll be different functions that other users want to do. So understanding and mapping that out as you go through your testing means you can sort all of that stuff early as well. A few programs I've worked on have just used the admin privileges to go all the way through the test lifecycle. And it's no surprise when you get to the end of it that people are struggling to understand why what they were doing before they weren't allowed to do now. And you get into those false positive defect situations where you're constantly chasing your tails to find an answer to a question that's already been answered. And so that's key, having that data strategy, security strategy, admin strategy, user strategy, and pulling that all to the front end of the life cycle to map it into the requirements that are being laid down. And for any budding test managers, test leads, QA leads who are listening, my advice to them is be bold. Don't sit in the room when you're doing your walkthroughs. If you don't understand, put your hand up again and again and again. Because as you go through the testing lifecycle, people will be looking at you to be the expert. Not just the expert on testing, but the expert on the system. So for you test managers out there, make sure you build a team. Make sure you build a team that is multifunctional. Make sure it supports the end user, the development team, the business analysts, and it supports you. You pull all that together, you'll have a successful implementation. But trust me, we've been saying the same thing for 35 years in testing. It all comes down to requirements. Get your requirements right, everything works fine. Thanks, you.
Thanks, Peter. There's a couple of things that that we've sort of picked up on from our experiences as well along the QA side. Is you need to, D365 is a sort of special beast. It has a lot of workflows and processes all built into it that, as Peter mentioned, that you should take it out of the box and try not to make any changes to it. But if you do make changes to it and you do want to test it, you need to have people who understand the workflow and who understands D365 from day one to be able to add value. So they can, if they're coming in as testers on, for testing a D365 project, it's good to have people who have D365 knowledge, especially on the modules that you're implementing, to come and work with you from the early days so they can understand the requirements and to map it out early on. So that'll be one of the things that I'll probably mention. And thank you very much, Peter. It's very, very, very useful, especially about the environments. I think that, the ideal situation as a tester, I guess, that, you want to come in and do test a particular scenario. Say, for instance, you want to delete an existing customer on a database, for argument's sake. If you want to do that, you want to have that customer in that database to be able to delete it, right? So if you think of that particular scenario and the tester's coming in to do that one test, and if you can give him that environment with the data that's got the person you want to delete on there, his job is done very quickly. But if it's not, then he'll have to do something else. So all of that thing will be very, very crucial in terms of environments and the planning around those. I'm going to hand over to my good friend Steve Williams, who is going to talk hopefully about the governance and the high level sort of project management and program management and change management side of things, to give us an insight of what sort of challenges that he has faced. Steve, over to you. Please introduce yourself, Steve.
Thanks very much. I've worked in the CRM space now for in excess of 18 years, helping various organisations of sizes, complexities and diversities in their operations. The range of users is from 50 to 14,000 implementation in the CRM space, but the amount of end users is not really of consequence, because the framework of delivery for a successful CRM is largely following the same pattern, which is what I try and advise organisations when I'm invited in to help them. Unfortunately, more and more of my work to date is helping CRM programs that are not in the best shape. They are in a state of flux. They're in flight, have been going for possibly 12 months, and the end users and the senior directors and board level are not seeing the benefits, are not buying into CRM as a program, and therefore people start to question, is it the right thing to continue? Is it going to deliver to what the business needs? And is the cost going to continue to escalate, where some programs, obviously the cost is important, the quality of what's being delivered is important. And some of the areas I'm going to cover briefly are really just high level areas that can really help if you start to focus on these things to start with. So my work when I go into an organisation is really to work at the strategic level to start with. And some of the speakers you've heard from today have touched on some of these elements. But what's important? What's the organisation trying to achieve with its CRM when it's implemented it? What does it want to look differently for the organisation in a year, 2 years, 5 years' time? What does that look like? So I centre very much on what's the purpose? Why are you doing this? We can break down the detailed functionality with the end users after that, but what is the scope of what you're trying to achieve? Once that's clear, we then tend to look at the business case. So has the business case been factored in a way that sets out very clearly what the scope to set everybody's expectations of this program? What is that scope? What is it going to take to deliver a quality implementation? So then make sure that the business case has all the attributes it needs, including costings, which are appropriate for the skilled resources you may need. The business will need to be heavily involved in the implementation as we go through. So factor that in with resources that may need to be accommodated outside of their normal business work to spend time on the CRM program. So then looking at getting that agreed at board level. And that should then be bought into at every level of the business and shared at a certain level with the senior management teams that are going to have the CRM introduced to their operations and the end users. Now, a lot of the projects and programs that are failing are due to the fact that they're being led by the IT itself, the technology. So they're either being led by the IT internal teams, and they take a lead role in the architecture. They take a lead role in protecting their current environments, because this will be something new coming their way that possibly they haven't dealt with cloud applications before. So there's a real nervousness there in how they approach this. So you need to bring them along with the journey, but it must be made clear that the CRM implementation is a business transformation program. It's not an IT, put a bit of kit on the desk and turn it on program. You need to get buy-in, you need to get adoption. And to help with that, the focus has to be on the change management. It's key that you have a solution like Dynamics that's very flexible and can provide many businesses with a richness of functionality and data and reporting. But if you have that sitting on someone's desk and they're not prepared to use it, they're not bought into it, they're not adding that richness of data to the system as part of their operations, then it really is an expensive piece of kit with lots of whizzy functionality that will never be realized and never bring the return on investment. So it's really key to center on the change element, and that change covers all sorts of areas. It covers communications, it covers the business requirements process and getting people involved early in the program. It's the training, it's the testing, it's the quality. It really is everything that is non-IT. And I don't class testing as an IT function, and I'm sure Peter will agree with that. It's making sure that the scope of the program that was provided in the business case is actually being delivered at the end in terms of richness of capability for the organisation to perform better, more efficiently, and get market lead with their competitors. And to that end, I normally have a framework that I introduce that ensures that the work streams and the governance of a program is set up correctly. So the change management work stream will have many strands to that. The data work stream will run in tandem, and the IT and development work streams, which are invariably offered by external consultancies and system integrators of varying degrees and sizes. It's important to have that involvement right the way through the whole of the journey of the implementation. So I make sure that the framework that I introduce is something that I've used time and time again. It's tweaked and tailored to the organisation, but basically it means that every work stream is brought along at the earliest possible stage and not left to the end of the journey. So for instance, we don't get the IT and developers going off into a darkened room and coming back and producing something which the business users will only see at the point of UAT. It's important to bring them along, have regular show and tells with the business users that have contributed towards the requirements, making them feel comfortable. They will go back to their teams, and their management in turn will start to feel comfortable with the program, and the buy-in and the change management piece will naturally flow from those type of events. Equally, the trainers make sure they are heavily involved to start with and working in tandem with the business analysts. As the requirements are being gathered, let the training team understand what it's going to look like. Let them be involved in making sure they've got their materials and approach so they can have that in turn approved by the appropriate stakeholders. And all this can be done in a very clear way with governance at the heart of it, but making sure that the business understand and the senior management teams understand it's a business transformation program. An example of which is I've just helped a very large insurance company in the UK, and the first thing I asked their board of directors was, Give me your understanding of what we are delivering and why for this particular program. And I had 10 different answers, and 2 of the board couldn't answer. So there was an invitation from me to go away and understand and work collaboratively together to understand what the CRM outcome should look like. And if you haven't got clarity in what that looks like, then you can't possibly deliver a successful CRM. And there's some of the main elements I would focus on. I would also suggest that some of the external consultants often get a bad name. They're often the whipping boys. If things are going wrong and if the testing is showing bugs, they will be the first people that point fingers at. Bring those external consultancies along with you. It should be a collaboration. It should be a partnership. If they are successful, you are successful, and the organisation gets what it needs. There should be an area where people can just get together, have honest conversations, and if things cannot be done in a technical way that's required by the business, then talk about those options. Be very open with your sponsors, be very open in your communications, and play back some of those challenges for the business themselves to be part of the solution. And I think that transparency, the change management emphasis, and bringing people along with the journey all leads to be a successful implementation. And the budget and scope is then something which you will find will naturally be adhered to, and you won't be straying too much from what's been agreed in the business case. Thanks for your time. Hopefully that was helpful, and I'll pass you back.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. All very insightful, and to be honest, if you need somebody to assist you, I'll be glad to work for you, because your ethos and methodology sounds really good to be employed with. I don't think there's anything more I can add to that. I think you covered quite a lot of things there. I'm going to just now pass over to Stefano. And Stefano's based in Italy, and he's a MVP. He's going to talk more about the technical side on the implementation side, about the challenges that he has faced, and I'm sure he has done. Obviously, he will tell you about the projects that he may have done. So, Stefano, over to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Stefano from Italy. I'm, as Sog said, an MVP for business application. And I'm also an Azure certified architect and DevOps engineer. I work in Italy as an head of development team for an Italian Microsoft partner that has the mission to develop Dynamics 365 solutions on different markets. We work with small and medium and large companies. So I think that I see all problems that all these categories of companies have. I mainly focus on the ERP side. So nowadays, my main focus after today is that side. I work also with all the stack of Dynamics 365, but the focus mainly is on the ERP side. And I actively collaborate with the Microsoft product team for developing the ERP products like Dynamics 365 Business Central, and for delivering official Microsoft trainings across Europe. And I work with Dynamics 365 from the very first release, when some of that product line was again not acquired by Microsoft. And Dynamics 365 today is a suite of products that I think that is universally recognized as a market leader. So many companies embrace Dynamics 365. And when a company adopts a software like Dynamics 365, is because it trusts the products, and it wants to adopt a software that governs consolidated business process, or they decide to renew a software that has been active for a long time. So from a technical point of view, normally, from small companies to the largest companies, I see that the main problem, the major problems of difficulties that I observe when adopting Dynamics 365 solution can be, in my opinion, grouped into some categories. The first, it can be the rigidity in changing business process to adapt them to the software, because maybe lots of companies have consolidated all the systems, and they are not ready to change the software, to adapt to the new software, but they want to the software that adapt to their business. And I think that's is always often an error. Another problem, technical problem that I see is often is the lack of trust in moving their business to a cloud solution, and companies are not ready on moving efficiently. They trust the cloud, but they are not ready to move efficiently to the cloud, because moving to the cloud is not only take a server from on-premise and go to the cloud, but it requires more than this. And another problem is often technical problem is often relating to historical data. They have often problem related to historical data, and maybe the main problem that I see is the methodologies they approach and understand the IT a renewable and IT process, because they start often companies start a renewable project, IT project without adopting the right methodologies. So to be more in depth on these personal categories, the first that I mentioned is the business process change. I think that when a company decides to adopt Dynamics 365 as a suite of products, they should always sit on the table and review their business processes, try to adapt them to the standardized processes that the Dynamics 365 offers, because they should. This obviously does not mean that the company must change totally their way of work, but they should review their internal processes, and they trust of the standard that Microsoft has implemented in the process, because it covers, I think, the main parts of the main business processes that every company in the world has, and they should turn up the standard workflows to adapt their needs, but without pretending that the new software must be totally recreated to satisfy their needs, because Dynamics 365 is a product that can satisfy your needs absolutely if you have the attention to review some of your business processes. And the other problem, normally technical problem that normally I see is related to cloud adoption. Cloud adoption means not that the people don't trust the cloud. There are companies that where cloud adoption is difficult, but I think that nowadays companies trust the cloud, and technically speaking, moving to the cloud is not only taking a business process or taking a business solution from a server that I have in my company and move that server in a cloud, or move my processes to the cloud. But to have a real working cloud solutions means that you need to adopt fully the cloud. So it means that you need to use cloud functions to cover your process, to move maybe some part of the process by using different cloud services like storage, like Azure functions, like other technical services that the cloud offers that can help you on having an efficient solution. I think that on many Dynamics 365 projects, this is not covered fully on many times, especially on the ERP side. They moved the ERP to the cloud, but it's like moving a server to the cloud, and this is not the way or work if you embrace the cloud, because the cloud offers many more than moving a server to the cloud, and your solution should embrace all the cloud stack, not only these steps. Another technical topic that I want to normally emphasize when I sit with the companies to evaluate the projects and to deploy projects in Dynamics 365 projects is often the success of a Dynamics 365 projects is not linked only to the effectiveness of the solution itself, but also is linked to the partner who follows you and who helps you on managing the projects. And I think that I believe that today a Dynamics 365 project cannot be handled effectively without adopting DevOps project methodologies, for example. And that means that I think that DevOps practices can help you on making the software release faster, controlled, guarantee quality assurance, and so on. And embracing DevOps. DevOps is, I think, it's a name that is hot today. But embracing the DevOps mentality is not only just to start the process and say that okay, we are doing DevOps, we are doing Agile, and so on. But we are using some tools related to DevOps. This is not adopting DevOps. I think that DevOps is a need that you should reevaluate your process. You should have standardized processes in particular way. You should analyze metrics of your process, and I think that this is not done often. For example, how you can handle releases, how you can handle your code, how your team that works with you is able to fix problems. These are metrics that I think that in a DevOps practice should be measured, and that can help you on having a successful projects. The same is related also to adopting CI/CD processes that on Dynamics 365 is a must today. So use Repo for your code base, use branches, use automatic building and releases. Don't work on production environment and stop, but create environments and create controlled automatic testing and releases phase. Because I think that if you have in place policies that permits you to automate testing, for example, it's much more performant, it's much more quality guaranteed instead of having a set of manual people that performs the same test again and again and again on every release. And I think that the most methodology is a must, but needs a lot of time and effort and disciplines to adopt. And but if a Dynamics 365 process starts with that in mind, can have a lot of success more than starting from blank. And another topic that normally I emphasize when we start talking about starting a technical project with Dynamics 365 as a suite is don't pretend to do all with a single product. That's, I think, an error that I see always, and as a Microsoft, we try to explain always. I see that, for example, people that starts with the CRM and want that the CRM does also ERP things, or vice versa. We people that starts with the ERP and they pretend that the ERP does also the CRM things for you. Or for data analysis, or the CRM makes data analysis and so on. I think that today Microsoft has an entire very powerful suite, and you should, when you start a technical project, Dynamics 365 technical project with the company, you should use the right product for the right tools, not only a tool for do does all. And the last message that I want to leave here is that I think that Microsoft listens to you. Microsoft is open to receive feedbacks, and if you adopt Dynamics 365, you can contribute to grow the product. And this is a message that normally I leave. MVPs are nominated for them. They can help to enhance the product, but I think that also the customer can help to enhance the product. So if a customer is able with its partner or with itself to share feedbacks directly to Microsoft, we can turn up the product and can help on growing the product always more.
So thank you, Stefano. That's very useful, very good things that you've mentioned there that, I think D365 as a product, I think around the table, we all agree is a very good and, very well thought out product if used correctly. And, it's all about that. It's the tool is right. It's very good. And it is gaining market share and, it's competitively priced. So if you go there with the mindset that this is my business and this is the only way I want to do my business, I want to change everything that D365 has to what I want to do this way, then you're going to have a little bit of trouble. But if you say, these are my business processes, this is how D365 does them, can I change my process so that I can do it within D365 and minimize the level of changes, then you'll be far better off. I think that's one of the things that Stefano is saying, and also the DevOps side. It's very key. The DevOps and the CI/CD pipeline. It's very crucial for releasing quicker changes to your production system. So you've got changes coming from Microsoft. You've got changes coming from your system. You've got changes coming from other integrated products. So if you've got a CI/CD pipeline, then it will be automatically built, integrated, developed, and test and put into production. So that sort of things that you can do will be very useful. I hope that these insights are meant to be in a way that it is giving you some guidelines, and I think that what tends to happen is things like DevOps is an industry best practice. It was developed over so many years. Ideas came in, and then it developed and into become industry best practice. So I think that these sort of ideas that we're putting forward hopefully become industry best practice in the future, because it's for the whole industry to improve rather than the people, a few of the people. So I've got a few questions that I have picked up over the few comments that the guys have made, and I'm going to go back to Jill Walker. Jill, I mean, when you go into an organization and I'm not saying that they will give you a rein and say, look, tell me what training I need. They might do. But if they did, the magic wand, the customer says, look, this is my current situation. We're putting on D365. These are the modules, and this is the people that I have. If they've given you, how would you go about evaluating how much training, from an overall perspective?
It is very much how long is a piece of string, because there are some organizations, and I have one of these within my current client base, who implement a very simple, a basic contact management process. And obviously the amount of training that an organization like that needs is going to be far less than where you're implementing multiple modules, lots and lots of users, and so on and so forth. What I would recommend, though, is regardless of how much training is the right amount of training for an organization, don't try doing it in one big lump. Space it throughout the project and do some of your training, giving people an opportunity to have their questions answered and to engage with a mentor who can show them how their particular challenges are met within the application that has been delivered. So we need lots and lots of different styles of training as we move through the project, and even once we've gone live, to keep people on top of the deliverable. But the key is not all at once, and then have reinforcement. And I think that will closely get you to enable you to eat that elephant one bite at a time.
Okay. Staying with you, Jill, just following on from that, what do you see sort of like the biggest skills gap is in D3? Do you see a skills gap in D365 market? You know, in terms of, do you have any idea, not specific numbers, but do you think that, you know, there is a shortage of D365 skills in the marketplace? And do you think that is it more on the user side or more on the technical side where the training will benefit?
I think there is a shortage across the board of skills, but I think where we need to be investing our effort is more on the technical side, because an untrained or a poorly trained technical expert is very, very dangerous. And one of the things that immediately comes to mind is none of us, well, we all don't know what we don't know. And so if you've got someone who maybe they're a power business user and they've got some experience, it won't take much to have more knowledge than that person. And therefore the techie person that we're now talking about could come across as an expert, where in reality they're not. Whereas we've then got other people who maybe got very deep knowledge in one very narrow area, but we would benefit by broadening their skill set and enabling them to take a bigger, a wider angle view of what we're delivering to those users. So if I had to vote for one, which I'd hate to do in real life, but if I was made to vote for one, my vote would be upping the technical education.
Right. Over to Steve. Steve, just a couple of questions there. As a program manager, project manager, program director, you've been through the ranks, and as a project manager, usually they're sort of like valued, or their remuneration or their bonuses are all linked around whether they've delivered a project on time, to quality, to budget, and also whether they've bypassed the internal processes. Obviously, you shouldn't really do that if they've bypassed the internal process. If they haven't, and they delivered on project, on time, to budget, to quality, and they did that, then obviously they are a superstar, and they don't get many of them. But what do you think about that? What is your view on that?
I think when there are internal project managers, invariably there will be, and program managers working on the project alongside others that may be brought in skill sets from the market. I think it's challenging for the permanent project managers, because they are very clear in terms of having to adhere to internal processes, both on the IT side, on the business side, and they have to make sure that they are, for want of a better phrase, ticking all the relevant boxes. However, some of those, by their very nature, those controls and processes internally that they need to adhere to, are constraints from a program and project delivering in the way that you would possibly want to. So the example would be that if an organization isn't used to delivering CRM programs, they're very different from upgrades to Windows 10, for instance. So the processes internally within the IT teams are very much geared to put in different widgets and upgrades in place from something like a Windows 10 upgrade, but not align themselves, and they don't lend themselves to CRM, which has to change the way it's looked at from a business point of view, the way the business processes change, the way that the implementation in the various environments, as we heard from Stefano earlier, that's all needs to be a different way of implementing CRM. So I think the project managers that are on premise, working for the organization, I think have a very difficult and challenging road, because on the one hand, they need to be seen to doing things in the way in which the organisation has to have it done, but they would like to bend and change because they're working as part of a dynamic programme and project team that need to work in a different way. The way I've combated that before is to make sure that the new way of doing things is brought to the right governance structures. So you take those things to your operational steercos, your IT teams through your directors through steerco meetings. So the governance allows you to have those discussions as to why you need to work in a slightly different way and to get the buy-in at that level understood, so that the project manager who's going to be rewarded, who has a career with the organisation, isn't stepping out of line. We just change the way in which the organisation does things to make sure the CRM programme can be successful, and in turn the project manager as well. So that's the way that I normally address those things. So the project manager can still work in a way where the organisation is supporting that person, but we can change things to make sure that the delivery of CRM is done in a way we need.
In terms of the project itself, I'm sure you've been in programs where they start off with a refined scope and scope starts to change. It comes from different directions, from the users to, even from the managing director of the company suddenly says, no, I want this added to this or whatever. How do you stop that scope creep, or how do you manage that? I mean, you can't stop all of it, but how do you manage that?
I think sometimes changing scope and changing direction should not be seen always as a bad thing, as long as it's done in a governed way with strict change management and governance processes around that. For any program of CRM, they can span from 6 months to 4 or 5 years. It's unlikely that an organisation will have the same strategic direction that's driving what they need throughout that 5-year period. So I think it's healthy to continue to look at the scope of what you're delivering and make sure that it still aligns with what the business expectations are to meet their KPIs that they're looking to do and the return on investment from their CRM. So I think as long as the governance is there and you've got clear change management processes, and this comes back to, unfortunately, some of the legacy change management processes that I see are in place in organisations are not either robust or they're not followed. And that's because there's been this kind of way of working that if somebody in a hierarchy, in a senior position in the organisation wants something, they bypass the process. The way I manage programs is that we don't do that. If you want something changed and there's a good reason for that, then you should take that change through the right process. And if it's a strategic change, which will impact a lot of the program delivery for CRM and would mean significant changes to functionality and business requirements that have been collected potentially, then you make sure that that's done at the right levels and cascaded down so that the new expectation of whatever we're now delivering is known by everybody, so that the end users and middle management aren't expecting what we were intended to deliver at the start, but there's now been a change of direction that's been agreed and that's communicated out. So I think it should be seen as a positive as long as the processes and governance is in place.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Thank you. And a couple of questions for Stefano. I've got here. With D365, when you buy it, you get the Azure Devops licenses. It's sort of pretty standard. Do you think that? And obviously, the question is a little bit difficult to answer because a customer might already have a DevOps process in place using other tools, and they might not want to use it. But if it's not, do you think that is advantageous for them to make use of those Azure DevOps licenses and build a D365 on a CI/CD pipeline on the Azure DevOps tool?
I think absolutely yes. We suggest always to adopt DevOps tools and Azure DevOps in particular. Azure DevOps is a language platform and cloud provider agnostic tool. So it's not linked directly to Microsoft technologies, but you can use this tool to apply DevOps techniques to every product that you have in place. And I think that Azure DevOps is a great tool because actually is I think the main product in the market that comprises all the range of services that cover the full development life cycle of a product. You can start using Azure DevOps, for example, with boards for planning your projects, tracking work items, and opening and managing your teams. You can use Azure repos for handling your code base, branching, and so on. So protect all your code base, and I think it's a must to do. You can use Azure Pipelines. That's another feature of Azure DevOps that permits you to having in place without providing infrastructures, a completely language and platform and cloud agnostic CI/CD tool that you can use for pipelines, for handling automatic committing and testing and building of your code without user interaction. So you place your code inside a repository, inside the particular branch. You can create easily a pipeline that tests your code, build your code, release maybe the code inside a testing environment. You can then with policies like authorization and so on, approvals, you can move this code from a testing environment to a quality environment where your user can directly perform testing. And then with the simple of a click, you can, when all agree to move in production, you can directly move your code in production, all without providing infrastructure or cloud managed. And I think it's a great tool that personally we use inside our company, but also with all our customers. We have this tool in places, and this tool is I think is useful. Was useful also in the past, but today where we are moving to cloud solutions, where our customer can be geolocated inside the world. Having a tool that permits you release, maybe releasing a fix as a partner, releasing a fix and deploying that fix automatically to all our customer base without connecting to every single customer and so on is a must. And also inside a company, I suggest to adopt them at least for managing your code, for managing your customizations, and for standardize your building and releasing process.
Thank you. That's very useful. Just one more thing around, with D365 comes, you got Power BI, you got Flow, you got Power Apps. So the idea of building low code, no code, and making business users develop applications very quickly over 5 minutes or whatever, it's all there. And how do you sort of control the over-eager people to just build new applications because they just like it, and maybe nobody uses it. They don't go follow through the same process and say, is this going to give me some return on my investment? Am I going to do something? None of that is followed. People just follow and say this is easy to build. So how do you stop people from doing that? Or do you see that as a problem or a positive or a negative, really, first of all?
Power Platform and tools like that makes quite easy to create new apps and extend the standard Dynamics 365 functionalities, and I agree on that. And everyday users with Power Apps, for example, and everyday user, business user, can create new functionalities with a user-friendly interface. That can be shared inside your company, that can work on mobile and so on. And I think that extending Dynamics 365 Business Center, Dynamics 365, as a suite with tools like Power Platform, for example, is, in my opinion, a road to embrace on many scenarios, because there are a lot of functionalities that can be well covered by creating Power Apps application, for example, or by creating cloud workflows with Power Automate or tool like that for data analysis. For example, Power BI is a great tool instead of creating embedded reports inside the product. But obviously, this should be carefully evaluated by your team, by your partners, and you should not abuse on that. I think that an important contribution for avoiding the overindulgence on creating applications should come from your internal project manager, for example, and from your partner, and that should evaluate before starting creating apps, random apps. And I really don't forget creating external apps for covering some lack of parts that can be a best practice in my opinion, but an important aspect on that is always check for the security, because I often found partners that create external application with Power Apps or something like that maybe uses connections with super users or full trust connections. But I suggest use role-based access security. Security is important if you create external applications. And so if you want to extend your Dynamics 365 application with Power Apps, with Power BI or something like that, do that if you're if it covers a lack of your software, but plans carefully and use security.
Okay, thank you. That's very useful. Thank you very much. And just a couple of questions for Peter, finally. I think you might have answered some of this already, but I just like you to elaborate a little bit more about when people start to get involved in terms of a QA governance to a project. When should they start to get involved? And secondly, if you think you've answered it well, then fine. What is the impact of, Microsoft Dynamics is what they call evergreen. So every 6 months they're releasing new patches, new upgrades, new functionalities, and not just every 6 months, but probably even every once a month with some patch upgrades. So when you're getting that, you've got this sort of system that you've built, which is on D365, which is migrated from some other data sources, and you've tested it all that. It's integrating with something else, and you've tested all of that, and you've added some functionalities of customization or configuration. So the whole thing has been tested and working very well, and all of a sudden here's this change that comes through from Microsoft in terms of a D365 change, and you can obviously be prudent and test those before you put it in, or you can be cavalier about it and say, no, I don't care, I'm just going to put it in and see what happens. I don't think many of us are going to do that, and we would not advise to do that. But how do you think that you can mitigate against this evergreen solution, or what kind of solution can we put for evergreen? So those are two questions I'll leave you with.
I think earlier I was talking about early involvement. When I think about QA governance and oversight, I think it has to be day one. If it's not day one of the project, you're already not potentially setting yourself up for rework in the future. If I think about what do we look for, well, we look to make sure things are testable. So I've been in the testing game since the mid-'80s. And the one thing that hasn't changed is if the requirements don't tell you what the functionality is going to do or the expected outcome, then it's very difficult to test. And so the earlier people can get involved in making sure, one, that you have an environment strategy that supports the outcome you're looking for, the requirements themselves are testable from all phases, not just a technology side of it, but the end user. Does the end user understand what the requirement is and how it's going to work in the new system? And can they map that back to their current process and adjust the process if they have to? And those conversations can be held when the QA guys are involved day one. They're very much harder to have when the QA guys are involved day 10 or day 20 or month 3, because you're already down a path where you're making changes to an application that you don't need to when there's a business process that could be changed just as easily. So my answer is, whenever anyone asks when should you be involved, I say day one. Has to be day one, because also you're part of the team. Successful delivery is building a team built around a joint culture that starts at the beginning of every program. When you bring people in later, they're already trying to adjust to an existing culture. And Steve made the point earlier, they then have to learn new processes, all new things, and try and fit in, as opposed to being part of the journey. And successful implementations of anything for me is where people are involved from the start and brought along on the journey and have that responsibility and accountability. The evergreen one, it's interesting. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to, and Stefano alluded to this when he was talking, a solid automation strategy, understanding what to automate, when to automate, how to automate going forward. So when you do have patches coming in on a monthly basis, you have an automation suite that can do the testing for you, and that automation suite can grow. Now, there's a little bit of a myth, I think, that automation means less cost, because you actually have to pay someone to automate it, and you actually have to pay for them to maintain the automation. It probably means a reduced cost, but not a less cost as some people are expecting. But that automation strategy means that you can cope with monthly patches, quarterly releases, 6 monthly releases, as long as you understand the content of what is being released. Your automation strategy can work through the elements you need to test. Now, I have possibly I should say this is maybe the opinion of Pete Thompson, not necessarily the opinion of the testing community as a whole. Like you say, you can have a cavalier attitude towards it. Implement out of the box, you shouldn't really need to test. But spending money on automation or spending money on running tests is really the insurance policy you buy to your problems in production. So you can actually spend as much as you want. And that's the premium you pay for the price you pay if you find a problem in production. So it's really buying insurance. And if you have a high risk appetite, and some areas of industry will, some areas won't, then you have to spend that little bit more in ensuring the successful implementation of your systems and understanding that you're playing in a dynamic space. Now, you're probably going from a static base to a dynamic space that changes every month. So building that automation strategy, a risk-based methodology that backs it up, understanding what needs to be tested and when, you just then can put it into your project schedule, so you don't get the scope creep that Steve was alluding to earlier, you don't get overruns, and you should be able to not impact your testing schedule that you set out to start with. So, yeah, day one with a solid automation strategy should cover everything.
Well, thank you very much. I think that covers my sets of questions, and I would just like to conclude by saying thank you to Stefano from Italy for joining us, giving up your time, and Jill for giving up your time, and to Steve and to Peter for giving up your time for this, what I believe is more educational than anything else for people to use. As I said, it's not meant to be a negative. D365 is a great product, lots of projects going on very successfully, but you may find the odd ones that you're in. When I'm in the audience, I'm talking about the audience. One of the audiences may be in a project where it's either failing or having difficulties, or you're going on to a project. Hopefully these insights will help you for the future. If there is any more information, as I said, Testhouse is a purely QA consultancy based on testing, and we don't do implementations and guidelines around quality assurance. If you want to get in touch, please do so. But otherwise, thank you all very much.